What's up guys, welcome to another tutorial video. Today's topic will be on how to work with imported textures and how to go about changing them up in Keyshot. Before we start, make sure to download the files needed in the description. You'll need the cement brick and the cement texture. Also down below I included a link to a Google Doc full of links to high quality textures you can use for future projects. And with that, let's get started. So before starting, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough on downloading textures. When you click on the link, you'll be directed to CC0. So here we have a wide selection of different resolutions. Realize that the higher you go, the more likely you'll have a slowdown. Also, between the PNG and the JPEG, the PNG is cleaner, but does come at the expense of a larger file, which can be a problem also. JPEG is more compressed, so it can be a little bit easier to work with. Me personally, I typically go for the 4K JPEG to have a higher resolution and also save some space on my computer. Also, some of these sites, if you scroll down, they have a preview window. So here we can actually see what the cement texture looks like on a cylinder. We can actually zoom in and pan around to take a quick look at it. And after a quick look, I do notice that it's the one that I want, so now we can actually go back to the model. So what we will be doing to this brick is texturing it and making it look like a molded brick of cement. So starting off, I will go and right click, edit material, and set this to a plastic. And the reason why I chose plastic is because it allows me a lot of flexibility to the things that I can actually change on the model. So let me show you what I mean. So I'll go over to the material graph. I'll switch this back to diffuse. And as you can see, there are only a few things that I can actually change on diffuse. I can only change the color, the bump, and the opacity. And we need way more settings than that. So I'll go over to plastic. And it actually gives me a lot more different options that I could play around with. So now that we're here, we can actually import our textures. So let's open up the folder where you have your texture. Let's highlight them and then drag them into your material graph. So now that you're here, you can actually start dragging these in. So we'll just drag the color to the diffuse, the normal to the bump. Then for the roughness, we're just going to drag that to the plus sign and then select roughness. And then the last one would be displacement. This one works a little bit different in that it actually plays around with the geometry itself. So what we're going to do is actually right click in an empty space, go to geometry, and then select displace. We're going to connect those, and then we're going to connect this to geometry. So you will notice that actually nothing happens, and that's because for a displacement to go through, we actually have to refresh the geometry nodes. But before we actually do that, we have to actually check that our displace is at the right height. So we'll just double click displace, and we'll set it to 1 millimeter, just to start off. And then with that, we'll click refresh geometry nodes. And now we can see it actually worked and it went through. Now that we're here, I'm actually going to mess around with some of the light setup so we can actually get a better looking image. So I'll go to lighting, product, image, photographic, high contrast, and then I'll go to environment and get a better light. Use the Dosh Apartments, head to environment, and change the color of the background to white. So now that we're here, we can actually start messing around with the texture itself. So I'll go back, so right click, material, and then go over to textures. And then one of the things I actually wanted to talk about was mapping type. So think of mapping kind of like you would wrapping a Christmas present. Right now our mapping type is set to box, and this works because our shape or model is actually more box-like than anything else. It doesn't look anything like a cylinder or a sphere. But when it comes to a very irregular shapes, you're probably better off using a UV or even using a camera style. So let me just demo camera real quick. It actually goes on to the model almost kind of flatly, but it does follow the camera itself. And it kind of gets rid of all these issues that you would see with using a different mapping type. But for now, we'll just stick to box. And then with that, we can actually start playing around with some of the scaling and a little details with the actual material itself. So first, you can actually change the scale. We can actually make it a little bigger. We can change it to our liking. I'll just keep it as is at 237. And also, if we go down to the bottom, there are a few things that we can actually change with the look itself. We can actually raise some of the brightness and also some of the contrast. Another interesting thing you could also do is click right here, blend with color, And with this, we can actually change the entire color of the texture. So right now it's set to black, but I could set it to a blue or even an orange. But for now, I'm gonna just undo those and just keep it as it was. And then lastly, we have our bump map. We can actually change the intensity of it by going to bump and bump height. Right now I could switch it to 2 to kind of bring forward those little details that we see in there. But sometimes be careful, since some bump maps may go on backwards or invert. So when that does happen, it may look a bit funny, and to fix that, you can actually change the bump height to a negative number to flip the whole thing around. So as you saw, it actually had a little bit of a shift. So what that did is actually make the peaks into valleys. But now to actually make it back, just make it a positive number. And that's how you import and work with PBR textures in Keyshot. So that concludes the video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys to learn to work with PBR textures. And also stay tuned for the 5th video in the series where we actually go over making your own material in Keyshot. Also, if you have any questions or helpful hints, make sure to write them down below, and I'll get them as quickly as possible. See you in the next one.